Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Just wanted to say thank you again to everyone for their nice comments. Um, and yeah, we're just gonna continue on here, make a few more videos. Hopefully try and get one out, like I said, at least once a week. But we've had a very positive response, and thank you again to everyone. One of the topics I wanted to talk about here today was is to touch on a little bit more about something that we talked about in the previous video. Previous video, you could check on our channel there. We put a video out on the relationship between the beat rate and the hairspring. So in that video there, I talked a little bit about if a watch has just been cleaned and serviced, and we know absolutely sure that everything was done to the watch properly. When we go to do a quality control check and we put the watch on the timing machine, when we see the beat rate jumping the way it did a little bit in that video, we knew that the hairspring wasn't completely flat. It's one of the checks that we go through aside from some of the other checks and timing out a watch and testing a watch. So here I like to test the watches after they've been assembled for 5 days. One to check power reserve in a watch, in checking a watch in multiple positions, running time, and things like that. But in that video, I said, you know, when a watch has been completely cleaned, what if everything's been isolated, that's really the only thing that's left. So when I say a watch has been cleaned, what are some of the things that go into that? Because there are a number of things, it's way too much to go through, that could contribute to the beat rate changing in a watch. For example, you could have dirty jewel holes, loose exit or entry pallet forks, shellac could be loose on the roller jewel. There are so many things that could make the beat error of a watch on a timing machine changed. If the watch wasn't inspected properly when it was first being disassembled, or after it's gone through its cleaning. So here we like to clean a watch twice. We do every watch that's sent in to us here. We do a pre-cleaning first, proper inspection of the watch when it's being disassembled. Now the reason why we do 2 cleanings is, one, if the watch is really gummed up, we can't check depthing. So end shake and side shake of gearing. We just can't do it. The watch has to be cleaned first. So since the first day I've ever been or spoken to watchmakers and I was learning to become a watchmaker, cleaning a watch by hand is something that I've always done and I will always continue to do. So the first cleaning that I ever do on any watch is I clean a watch by hand. The second cleaning, once everything's been adjusted and done, then a watch goes into the cleaning machine. Then from there, everything is reassembled and inspected when it's gone back through there. So that's a staple here. Every watch gets 2 cleanings. It's non-negotiable. For myself anyway, it's just a quality control standard that I'm gonna keep. So when we're doing the first cleaning and we're inspecting things, for example, all of the shellac is checked in a watch. So here, for example, I have a beautiful Venus 170. It's a very, very nice watch. And what I'm talking about here is connected actually even more important for a chronograph. Not that it's not important when it comes to a manual wind or an automatic, but one, when you're trying to isolate things going wrong with a watch, if it's done properly from the beginning, it's very easy to diagnose afterwards. So for example, we have the balance that's here. All the shellac in the watch is checked. So the shellac on the bottom of the pallet forks, entry level jewel, exit jewel, everything is checked. We also check all the divisions of the escapement. So for example, the lock on both sides of the entry level jewel and exit level jewel, they're checked under a microscope. A watch has to have equal lock on both sides. So what I find over the years with, and I touched a little bit upon this in the previous video, over the years, shellac becomes a little bit loose, and then what happens is sometimes the positioning of the entry and exit pallet fork jewels, they move a little bit, so you get an unequal depth of locking. So that has to be adjusted also. So that's also done on a microscope. So at that point, how do we know what is the correct total lock on a watch? So that's one of the things you're taught when you become a watchmaker. Depending on the beats per hour of a watch, it changes a little bit from there. That we'll have another video on. The shellac on the roller jewel, that is also checked, making sure that the roller jewel is perfectly straight. The depthing of the roller jewel inside the pallet fork. So this is basically called the divisions of the escapement. So what we would do is on a chronograph like this, while we're checking all of the depthing and the correct interactiveness on the chronograph here, when we get down and we isolate the escapement, we would check to make sure that the escapement wheel, all the teeth are okay on that. And then also the interactiveness of every single tooth with the escapement wheel going through the pallet fork. And then the divisions of the escapement a little bit further when it comes to the division and the condition of the roller, the guard pin that's on the pallet fork and things like that. Now, when we have a chronograph like this, it goes even deeper. So essentially what happens with the chronograph is, there's a number of different chronographs or functions. This is a very traditional layout. It's got a column wheel over here. So basically what happens is this is one base movement. And then what happens is the chronograph here is built in on top of the base movement. Okay, so this one here actually has a pinion which brings up the power from the base movement up into the top part of the chronograph here. Now there are a number of different ways that could be done. There could be a vertical clutch that's in a watch. It could be a horizontal clutch that's in an escapement, or a pinion like this. And I really like the 170 here because it's got a slightly different layout because of the pinion that's driving it. So if the main movement here is not done properly, it will affect the chronograph at the top. Okay, so whenever we're doing a chronograph like this, the main movement before any of the chronograph compartments are done on there, the main movement is done first. It's tested for a minimum of 24 hours. Actually 24 hours for timing, and then also for the power reserve, because we want to make sure that the power reserve is working good first before we attach the chronograph modules from there. And also when I talk about the divisions of the chronograph, each of the components here, and we'll go into a little bit deeper one video onto how a chronograph works, but all of the components of the chronograph here have to be checked for how they interact together. So real quick, basically is when the power, there's always a way that the power is brought up from the main part of the movement in order to drive the chronograph. And then we have the chronograph hammers here. We got the column wheel here. The tolerances in all of these components here is very, very minimal. Everything has to be checked, all the angles, to make sure that the chronograph is resetting back to zero, to make sure that the pinion has an exact, it's approximately 2/3 engagement, around 66% engagement with the center chronograph wheel here that's got the recording seconds on the opposite side for the chronograph. Also the tooth, which clicks over and registers 1 minute on the minute recorder through here, that has to have a certain depthing and adjusting also. So even to go a little bit further into some of the checks that go into a watch, a chronograph, this is why we charge more for a chronograph. This is why a chronograph takes longer. And then if everything is done correctly here, when we're doing our quality control and we're checking on a timing machine, the things that we check for now is when the chronograph is running after 24 hours. What is the amplitude on the watch when the chronograph is running? Do we have a sudden drop off in amplitude as soon as the chronograph is turned on? Is the actual chronograph capable of running a minimum of 24 hours? And what's the timing on that? There's a lot of different checks that we go through. Like I said, about the interactiveness of the parts and things like that. And when we get something as old as this movement here, in the previous video I touched upon two of the things that I've noticed when it comes to regular movements or manual wind or automatics, is in a lot of the movements I find the banking pins have been bent. So now we have to return those back to factory settings and tolerances. So we have to readjust, also make sure that what was the reason for those banking pins to be changed. Also, I mentioned the regulator pins. They seem to be bent one side or another, never parallel, never the proper spacing between them. In chronographs, the two things that I notice the most is either no oil or way too much oil. And this always contributes to there. One of the other things that I've noticed, but I do get the watches in when they need to be serviced, is amplitude low and things like that. But for the most part, way too much oil or not enough oil at all. So now when we don't have enough oil, or if there was a lot of oil and it's starting to get gummed up, with no oil, we run the chance of parts wearing really quickly and things like that. So I just wanted to add another video to some of the checks that go into when servicing a watch. As far as the escapement goes, the next thing I wanted to talk about here is the depthing, the end shake and side shake of all of the gears. When a watch is taken apart and reassembled, especially when it's reassembled, all of the checks have to go into for end shake and side shake. Very, very important, especially with the chronograph. Again, everything has to gel together, and the tolerances for space is extremely minimal. And when I'm servicing a watch, I do warranty my watches for 1 year for service for my work. If the watch is dropped or something like that, we can't stand behind something like that, but we'll be here if the watch needs fixing. But we're not looking at only getting a watch to run properly for 1 year. We're looking to get a watch to run properly for a minimum of 5 years after, and then you could bring it back to me and we can have the watch serviced again. This particular watch does have a brake on it right here. So there are some movements in a chronograph that do not have a brake. And this is one of the other checks that I wanted to go over in this watch here. So any watch without a brake or a stop lever here on the center seconds wheel, if a chronograph is not serviced properly, there's a tension ring that's right underneath here. If the chronograph is not serviced properly, that tension ring has to be set very, very, very specific. It actually works as two functions. If there's no brake on the watch, that means if the watch gets ajar, the seconds hand could actually move. So it's one of the key components into servicing a watch. One, it acts as a brake, but two, if there's too much tension on it, it actually will be an amplitude killer in a watch. So I hope this sheds a little bit more light. I wanted to do something out there on a chronograph just to touch upon the reason why it takes as long as it does to do a chronograph, especially with the older ones. They've been used for many years before. There's a lot of wear and tear on the parts, and we just want to make sure that everything is working properly. So aside from the regular divisions of the escapement, checking for wear on the barrel, the end shake and side shake of a regular movement, there are a lot of checks when it comes to a chronograph that everything is working properly. So I just want to say thanks again for your time, and I hope this sheds a little bit more light into I wish it was just, we could just take apart a watch, throw it in the cleaning machine, put it back together. And I wish my life was a little bit easier than that. there's a lot of eccentrics also in a watch. So the gearing and the movement that's allowed to have everything run properly. You have to know the difference when you're servicing a chronograph, the eccentrics that are in here also, just to have everything move in and interact together for the starting, stopping, and resetting of the chronograph. But I'll get into a much deeper video on that at a later time. We'll completely disassemble a chronograph. I'll go through each component, what we're looking for as far as wear goes, and things like that. So thank you very much for your time. I hope this sheds a little bit of light, because I had some clients asking, for the chronographs, just a little bit more information on them, and why it takes so long, and things like that. So if you're interested in getting me to do a watch, or a chronograph, or anything like that, you could log on to my website at www.thecanadianwatchmaker.com. My email, my contact information is there. We're also on Instagram at The Canadian Watchmaker. And yeah, you can get a hold of me. I do offer a pickup and drop off if you're in the Toronto area. I'm in Toronto, Canada. And also, we do sell watches. There are some watches that are on my website. And I do also sell on eBay under The Canadian Watchmaker. So you can always look that up. And I do have some chronographs that are available. And if most of them have been serviced, I don't think I have any chronographs that are available at the moment that haven't been serviced. They would have gone through this process also, and much further in depth than what we spoke about here. Yeah, thank you very much for your time, and we'll talk to you soon.